Welcome to Faith and Work. I'm Carol Evans, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast was born out of a passion to help people live boldly in their faith while embracing the work you've been called to do. Whether that's a boardroom, a classroom, a kitchen, anywhere God's placed you, you carry a unique light. Right where you are, you have the power to reflect the love, hope, and compassion of Jesus Christ in a way that no one else can. Your job isn't just a job, it's a calling. In your faith, it's not separate from your work. It's woven right in the middle of it. So let's go. Let's talk faith, purpose, and let's live it out right where we are. 8 or 9 years ago, we were having dinner with some friends at the house. I think Jackson was just a baby, so it had to be about 9 years ago. And he mentioned 2 books that had really transformed his business. And I love talking about business. I love talking about books. I love talking about extended learning and how we're growing and how we're changing. And those 2 books really intrigued me. And he brought them over and I read them and I gave him some books. This particular friend, him and his wife have been friends of David and I's for a long time. And when I think back on the years of friendship, all the book recommendations we've given each other as a couple have always been a great resource. And this one was no different. The 2 books that he recommended that day were The New Gold Standard, about the Ritz-Carlton and their customer service culture and mindset and their service organization. There was another book by John Gordon, The Energy Bus, another great book. But today I want to talk a little bit about The New Gold Standard. Because this book, while it is about the Ritz-Carlton and it's about a hospitality organization and what they've done over the years they've been open and what they've done to maintain this culture, that book changed the way that I worked in my job. It changed how I operated a support organization. The Ritz-Carlton is now over a $3 billion organization. They have over 100 locations that are spread out over 30 different countries. With that organizational size, they have 40,000 employees. 40,000 employees. So as I'm reading this book and I'm hearing about the changes that they've made over time, I'm hearing about the feedback that they received from their guests and how they implemented change. And it baffles my mind when I think about it. But their organization is known not just for being an expensive hotel, but they are known for the service that they give their guests. Just a few weeks before COVID hit the world and everything shut down, David and I had the chance to go to Atlanta to celebrate our 9th wedding anniversary. And this was early February or maybe late January. But this was in 2020, right before everything shut down. And we stayed in the Ritz-Carlton Atlanta for 2 nights, went to a Celine Dion concert. We're both big fans, and it was a great time. But we really picked Atlanta when we were planning a trip. I was so excited to stay at a Ritz-Carlton. It's the only one I've ever stayed at, and it was such an unbelievable experience. I had read the book, and then I started looking up YouTube videos on it and watching different documentaries on the culture, on the history of the company. And I just became enamored and fascinated with the Ritz-Carlton. So staying at the hotel was such a treat. But when I first booked the hotel, I decided to do a little bit of a test because I had read in the book about how they hear one detail about someone's stay and everyone knows about it, and how they bring it up to you and how they find ways to remember. So I thought I would do a little test. We got to the hotel, and I didn't mention to anybody that it was our wedding anniversary or we were there celebrating. Our anniversary is in December, but it's so hard to celebrate in December. So we typically will do something when David's on break or when it's an easier time to travel. So this particular trip, I had booked the Ritz-Carlton 6 months before at least. And I told one person over the phone when we were booking, and she said, "Are you celebrating a special occasion on the trip?" And I said, "Yes, we're celebrating." I think it was our 9th. Maybe it was 8th. I don't remember. Because typically we celebrate either early or late because of schedules in school. And so I don't remember exactly what anniversary. I think it was our 9th wedding anniversary. And I told her before we were celebrating our anniversary over the phone. I asked her also about getting a reservation to the restaurant that night, and she said, yes, I'll take care of that for you. So we did all of that on the phone, and then I didn't talk to anybody at the hotel until we walked in the front door. We walked in the front door, and as soon as we got to the front, and I told her our names, and she said, oh, happy anniversary. Congratulations on the 9 years. And she named the year because that one person on the phone 6 months before had written it down in the notes. They proceeded to be extremely gracious through the check-in process. And as we were getting checked in, we walked over. There was a little shop to buy like snacks and stuff. We walked over, and David was getting some bottles of water. I wanted to get a piece of swag that said Ritz-Carlton because I was just geeking out that I was actually in a Ritz-Carlton. And David was getting some bottles of water. We are big water drinkers. And he said, I cannot believe how expensive this water is. And he was going on a little tangent about water, bottled water being expensive. And I'm trying to shut him up because I don't want anyone to hear us complain about the expensive bottled water. We're in a Ritz-Carlton. Most people staying at a Ritz-Carlton make significantly higher incomes than David and I make. And so I really was trying to not complain about the bottled water. And I'm trying to say, like, it's no big deal. Just, it's fine. It's fine. We're here for 2 days. Not a big deal, babe. And an employee happened to hear David say, can you believe this? And he saw us have several bottles of water in our hand. And he said, do you drink a lot of water? And Dave said, yeah, I have to have water at night with me and I drink water first thing in the morning. I just love having bottled water. And the guy said, well, here, let me help you out. And he said, just put that water back. And he went behind the counter and he brought back an entire case of bottled water. And David looked at me and I looked at David and they said, here you go. Enjoy your stay. He said, well, will that be enough water? And we were shocked and we didn't even know what to say. And in my mind, I thought, you have just elevated this experience with a case of water that probably cost $10 in itself, but you have just elevated this experience way beyond what you could possibly imagine for David. And we got in the elevator and he said, did you see what just happened? And we both walked to the elevator thinking, I can't believe that just happened. And we got in and the whole way I'm geeking out. And I'm like, babe, I told you this is the kind of stuff they do. Because I had learned in the book that every employee has a certain dollar amount that they have to spend to elevate a guest experience. And this is not necessarily a budget or a quota. This is more of they are being entrusted with this amount of money that they can use without asking permission of anybody. They don't need to get approval to use this money. Each employee, no matter where they work in the organization, if you work in housekeeping, you have the same amount of money as someone who works in a restaurant or someone who works at a front desk or the concierge. Every individual employee has $2,000 that they are allowed to use to enhance their experience. I'm not sure if it's per guest per day or if it is per shift. I'm not sure how that part works as far as the money. If I recall correctly from the book, I believe it is per day that they can use to enhance a guest experience. And that case of water did not overall cost Ritz-Carlton a lot of money. But when that guy saw David with several bottles of water in his hand and he's trying to juggle our luggage and the water, and I'm sure there was a distressed look on David's face. I'm trying to say, let's not be distressed. We're at the Ritz-Carlton. We're on an anniversary trip. But he chose that moment to step in and to say, hey, man, you drink a lot of water? And he gave us that entire case of water. And in the 2 days that we were there, we used that whole case of water. And we still talk about that. It made an impact on us. So throughout our stay, we had several different experiences where they did a turn down service where they would obviously make your bed in the morning for you when you left. But then in the evening, they would come back and do a whole turn down service. The lights would be dimmed. Your covers would be turned down. They would make sure you had a robe in your room. It was an incredible, luxurious experience, one that we've not experienced since quite to that level, but it was a wonderful 2 days of a trip. Eating at their restaurant was a great experience. We went to the Celine Dion concert the next day, and on the way back, I said, oh, we should just see if the restaurant is still open and maybe we can just go and get some dessert. So we called the hotel. We were in an Uber and we called the hotel to see if the restaurant was still open. And they said, no, our restaurant is not still open, but the kitchen is still open and we can have dessert waiting for you in your room. So we ordered a dessert from the Uber and we got to our room and there was a beautiful dessert platter waiting for us on a cart. I mean, it was beautifully laid out. It wasn't like room service had left something at the door. They had taken it into the room. They had set it up for us. It was a beautiful, romantic dessert waiting for us. It was amazing. We had a delicious breakfast delivered to us the next day. The most amazing breakfast I've ever had in my life delivered to us the next morning. They were an unbelievable experience. When I read that book and I read about how in the world do you get 40,000 employees to adapt to the same culture, the same service level culture, that someone can write a book and I could go to Atlanta, Georgia and have the same experience that you're writing about in this book. And I would encourage you, if you're in any service organization at all and your job requires any level of service, I would highly encourage you to read The New Gold Standard. But when I think about this book and I read this book and I imagine the size of the company, and I imagine you've got 30 countries all over the world with 100 different properties. I think now they've recently launched a yacht. They have yachts that you can do cruises and yachts on the Ritz-Carlton. I've obviously not done that. That's a pipe dream one day to be able to do that. But if you get 40,000 people to adapt to this mindset and this culture, and they explain of how to do that in the book in more detail. But this isn't just something that they do for their guests. This is not something that they do so that they can have a good rating or that they can have more guests. Their mindset has definitely been on a quality over quantity. They are building new locations. I still keep up with the Ritz-Carlton and what they're doing. They have a leadership center where they do a lot of training and development. I've been through a few of those courses. Highly recommend those. If you're in leadership and you have the ability to choose what development that you do, look it up. Highly recommend it. It's a great, great training. I've really never been in a hospitality job or role. Being even in technology support, there's so many things that I could bring back to my team, and it has truly changed the way I view service. But one example that I loved, and it was found in chapter 7 of the book. If you read the book or you do the audiobook, I did the audiobook, and I've listened to it several times. Every time I listen to it, I get something out of it. But chapter 7, there's a really amazing story. There is a lady by the name of Vivian Duchel. She's the vice president of public relations. She tells a story about one day when she was walking down the hall, and she happened to be limping just a little bit. And Simon Cooper, that was the president of Ritz-Carlton, saw her limping and said, "Hey, what's wrong with your back? Are you okay?" And she said, "Oh, we've got to get a new mattress. The one we have just does not have enough support." And they went on about their day and their conversation. But we're talking about the vice president of public relations and the president of Ritz-Carlton. A few weeks later, she has a knock on the door with a delivery. And in that delivery, they brought her a new box spring, a new mattress, new bedding, the whole Ritz-Carlton bedding, sheets, everything. Brought it to her, delivered it to her. This was not something just to get something else in return. Having a service mindset and a mindset that wants to do above and beyond what is required has to start with the people around us. It's not just the guest. We're talking about a president and vice president. The vice president of public relations, I'm sure, could have bought her own mattress. I'm sure she had the budget and the finances to go do all of that. But the president saw a need. He didn't announce it. He didn't put it in the newsletter of here's how we take care of our own, hashtag good culture. He just did it. He didn't make a big announcement. There wasn't a big deal. But this idea and this mindset of doing things not just for our guests, not just for our customers, not for our employees, not for our team members, and not even for our own families. We're doing this for someone. He did this for someone that he worked with that could have bought their own mattress, and he went above and beyond anyway. There's countless stories. One of my other favorite stories about one of their guests is a young couple who had a child with them at the Ritz-Carlton at their stay. I believe it was one of the beach locations. I don't remember which one, but they were at a beach location. And this particular family, their child had left behind his favorite stuffed animal. They didn't realize it until they were too far from the hotel. The child was so upset and so sad. If you have children, they are such a wonderful gift, but when they get attached to a stuffed animal, we call them stuffies at our house, or their favorite blanket, and it's left behind somewhere, it's a type of grief that is not easily comforted. It is hard to get them to see beyond the short term of, we can get it back, it's okay. But in this particular case, the mom and the dad, they didn't know if they could get it back. They didn't know where it was. They just knew they'd lost it somewhere on the property. Well, when they called the front desk, other people got involved. It ended up going to someone in loss prevention. And they went to the person in housekeeping and said, have you seen the stuffed animal? But they not only called them and said, have you seen the stuffed animal? They went down there with them and they sifted through the sheets that had been taken up from that floor of the hotel, and they found the stuffed animal. But before they could get the stuffed animal back, what they did was they got the stuffed animal and they had him pose at all different places throughout the property. And they had him pose at the pool and the spa and all these different places. And they took pictures with the stuffed animal and different employees. And they packaged all of this up, sent it back to the family, and how comforting for that little boy. When he opened the box, he saw that favorite stuffed animal, and it said, I wasn't lost, I just extended my stay. That is going above and beyond. For the director of loss prevention to go down into housekeeping and sift through the sheets, that's unbelievable. But then for that same director of loss prevention and take the time, it was worth their time. And they didn't need any approval. They had it within their budget and within their purview of their job to take that stuffed animal, to not just box it up and ship it back with a nice card, but then to take the time to go all over the property, to take pictures, to get those pictures printed and put them in the box, send them to that little boy. He'll never forget it. What an unbelievable opportunity to serve people when you have the resources within your power, within your means to enhance someone's experience. And the book is filled with, it's really a mixture of the processes of what they do, how it's implemented, and then also those guest experiences. And there's countless stories of employees. There's stories of guests. There's stories of people who were going through a difficult time health-wise and what they did to care for those people. There's stories of guests who wanted something really simple, like a different kind of jelly or a drink that wasn't offered. And what they did in between a server running down the road to go find a Coke or Pepsi product, whichever one it was, and they didn't offer it at the time. And they ran down the road to get the guest the drink that they requested. The guest had no idea. They didn't say, just so you know, I had to run down the road and get this Pepsi for you in hopes of getting a bigger tip. They just did it. It's not about the tip. It's not about the award. It's not about the rating. It's about having a culture that looks for opportunities to elevate the guest experience. And this idea, for me, in a technology organization, it felt huge. It shifted the way I work. It shifted how I operated. And I can still remember listening to the book on the way to work and stopping and taking notes and shutting down the audiobook for just a second and telling my phone to, Siri, send me a reminder to go do so-and-so, and sending myself a text message as a reminder of, we could do this and we can do that. And I had so many ideas of how we could implement service on my team and in our organization. The support that my team offers is to other employees. It's not to outside customers. We're not customer facing. We have customers, but the customers that we always refer to are internal employees. So how we respond to elevating someone's experience might be doing something that we don't necessarily have to do, but we could do to help them. Sometimes people ask for something, and before we do exactly what they ask us to do, we have to stop and ask a few questions, because there might be a way that we can get them what they need to get a little faster and help them with what they need help with, but it might be a different method than what they originally asked for, and the other method could really benefit them even more. But I had so many different ideas of processes and things we could do, ways we could be proactive with people when they ask for X, but really they need Y, and what we can do to help people. This idea of going the extra mile of customer service, these ideas are not original to the Ritz-Carlton. They're not original to me. We can find this same thought and this same idea about doing above and beyond. We can find it in several places in the Bible. But one of my favorite examples of going the extra mile is when Jesus is talking in Matthew chapter 5. In the early part of chapter 5, if you have a red letter Bible, you may see a lot of this highlighted in red in your Bible. But in the beginning of chapter 5, it says, "And seeing the multitude, he went up to the mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth, and he taught them." What I want to highlight today is down in verse 38. The whole chapter is amazing. And he is teaching things that are countercultural to their day, and they don't make sense. What's beautiful about so many of Jesus' teachings, if you look at it and you look at the cultural context, sometimes we read it and we think, well, that's interesting. I don't know why that's a big deal. Well, because Jesus wasn't American. He wasn't part of our culture. He didn't speak English. We can speak to him. We can pray to God the Father in English, and he hears us and he understands us. But sometimes these little moments in the Bible, we don't get them because Jesus wasn't American. He didn't have our culture. So when you look deeper at the cultural context, that what was being said, we can read the Bible and we can gain so much from it. But when we take the time to look at the cultural background, there is a depth to what is being said that we miss when we read surface level content and we check off that we've read the Bible for the day. Then it takes us about 3.5 minutes. There's so many things that we'll miss. If you're interested in resources, send a number to the text. At the end of the episode, I give a phone number. Text me. I would love to send you some resources. If you're interested in studying the Bible from a cultural perspective, I highly recommend it. It has deepened my love for the scripture because it helps me to see the nature of God even more. So let's go to verse 38. In verse 38 it says, "And ye have heard that it's been said, an eye for an eye, tooth for the tooth. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite you on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man so sue you by the law, that ye take away thy coat, let him have the cloak also. And whosoever shall compel you to go a mile, go with him 2. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not away. Ye have heard it, and it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you." And he goes on in the chapter, and the chapter's filled with so many things. When we hear Jesus give these examples of, it's not just the law. It's not just obeying the law. When Jesus is telling the disciples and he's telling people that are gathered, he's saying it's not about going 1 mile. If someone compels you to go a mile, go with him 2 miles. What does that mean? What is that referencing? Well, back in that time period, there were Roman roads that were built. In its prime, there were over 50,000 miles of Roman roads that were built. 50,000 miles. If you've done any study in history, you may have heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Well, that's what it was referring to. There was so many thousands and thousands of miles of Roman roads. And by law, at that time period, if a Roman were to compel a Jew and say, I need help with this, carrying these bags, or taking my horses, or I'm moving, or I don't know, I went to the market, I don't know what all they'd be transporting. But if they needed help by law, by Roman law, the Jews were compelled to help them walk 1 mile. Every mile, there were mile markers on the road that showed when they would reach a Roman mile. A Roman mile was measured a little differently than how we measure our miles. They were literally held accountable to going 1 mile. There are very few stories in the Bible where we see Romans and Jews that actually got along. There are a few, but very few. Typically, if you were friends with Rome, then you weren't friends with the Jews. It was by law. You had to walk the first mile. Some studies that I've read say that they were paid to go the first mile. Other studies say no, they were not paid. I don't know if they would tip them. I'm not sure how that worked. One day we can find out when we get to heaven. But by law, they were required to go the first mile. Can you imagine being someone who's hearing this lesson? And imagine being on the road and seeing a Roman. And they say, hey, help me with this. And man, your gut is turning because your nations don't like each other. You do not get along. You do not see eye to eye. There is a clash in your cultures. This is not your friend. By all intents and purposes, this was your enemy. And you see them on the road, and you know that you are required by law to help them with that first mile. And maybe you're walking that first mile and things get a little quiet, they get a little awkward, and you think about the words of Jesus. Think, man, I know he said we should go the second mile. I don't want to walk with this Roman any longer than I have to. I really do not want to go the second mile. And you get to the end of the first mile, and you have to swallow in your gut and say, you know what, I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you one more. And they look at you and they think, why? Why would you do that? You're not required to do that. You don't have to walk with me the second mile. But you do it anyway. You don't do it anyway because they're going to pay you for any public praise. You don't walk the second mile because it's going to make you an extra $1. You walk that second mile because you're living out not just the law, but the grace that Jesus talks about. When he talks about going the second mile, turning the other cheek, giving them the coat and the cloak. I think it's so ironic that Matthew, as the tax collector, wrote this book, and later on in the chapter, he talks about the tax collectors. He talks about, in this chapter, you say that you love your neighbor, and we want to celebrate the fact that we love our neighbor. And then he said, I say to you to love your enemy. Not just loving your neighbor, but loving your enemy. And going the second mile with a Roman for a Jew, that was loving your enemy. That was doing something for your enemy. Not because they were going to do something for you. This was not a tit for tat. They were not going to repay the favor and say, you know what? You've just walked with me a second mile. Is there anything I can do for you? That wasn't what was going to happen. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for boundaries to protect yourself. But today we're not talking about boundaries. We'll do that in another episode. Today we're talking about the people in our lives, the opportunities that we have in our jobs to go the second mile, to have a mentality like at the Ritz-Carlton where you were looking for an opportunity to elevate someone's service, not because they're going to do anything in return for you. We're looking for an opportunity to show the love and compassion and forgiveness of Jesus Christ. We are not called to live a life filled with good deeds and charitable giving and tax write-offs. We are called to live our life in a selfless manner that reflects the love and compassion and forgiveness that we have received ourselves in Jesus Christ. It might be easier to buy coffee for a stranger than it is to reach down and help someone that we would consider an enemy. So what does all of this mean for you? What does it mean for me? And truthfully, I don't know exactly what it means for you. But if I had to guess, I would say that while we were talking about this, and if you're driving down the road on the way to work or you're coming back from car line, I would guess that there's someone that came to mind. There's a certain situation that you know you could go the second mile, and it's hard. Maybe a face or a name came to mind. Today, I would like to challenge you to look for opportunities to go the second mile with that person, with that situation. There's an email that was sent that you could respond pretty awfully to. You could respond in anger, just like the anger that the email was sent in. You could respond right back in anger. And instead of doing that, you can offer whatever solution that the email is complaining about, whatever they're angry about, offering the solution, walking away, and not responding in anger, even though you might be justified. Going the second mile means that we don't need a reason to find someone worthy of our good deeds. Going the second mile for someone means that we don't think, well, do they really deserve this forgiveness? Do they deserve this act of kindness? Do they deserve for me to spend extra time? I'm working through my lunch break to help them with this. Do they deserve this? Going the second mile means that we don't need other people to be worthy of us being kind to them and us going above and beyond for them. We justify sometimes our actions when we don't want to go the second mile. We can justify it. We can paint ourselves as the victim, and we can very easily paint the other person as the villain. We can tell ourselves and tell other people, I could have helped them with that paperwork, but you know what? They didn't want to be kind to me, so be it. I could have made that process easier for them, and you know what? I'm not doing it. It's not part of my job. I don't have to do it. I could have volunteered to help. I was free. I technically could have replied to that text, but you know what? They didn't help me last time when I asked for help. I'm not helping them. We justify our actions, and we look for reasons for other people to be worthy of our good deeds. And that's the problem. Ritz-Carlton can't change 40,000 employees by the guest doing something nice in return for that employee. These employees, on average, of all the 40,000, on average, these employees make about $75,000 a year, on average. According to several different websites that I checked on Google, that's the average salary of a Ritz-Carlton. The majority of them are not six-figured employees who are only being kind because their bonuses depend on it. They're being kind because they're part of a company, and that's their culture. They talk about their culture. They recite certain parts of their credo every day as an employee. It becomes ingrained in who they are, not just what they do. And when we think about someone being worthy of our act of generosity or worthy of our kindness, it needs to become part of who we are, to look for opportunities to show kindness, to look for opportunities to show grace, to look for opportunities to physically pick up the load and carry it and inconvenience ourselves and go the second mile, not because they're worthy, but because He is worthy. Because when I sit around and I look at the blessings that I have and what I am most thankful for, and the reason that I can sleep at night is not because of the house that I live in, and it is not because of the car that I drive, it is not because of my two crazy children and my wonderful husband. Those are not the reasons I can sleep at night. The reasons that I can sleep at night are because of the goodness of God and the peace that He's brought in my life. The reason I can sleep so good at night is not because of the stuff that I have. It is because of who God is. It is because of the mercy, the forgiveness, the grace, the compassion, the presence of Holy Spirit in my life. That is what helps me every day. When I think about the goodness of God and our choir is singing on Sunday at our church, and I look around and I see people with their hands raised in worship, it is not because of the stuff that I have. It is not because I am worthy of things and He has blessed me with stuff or a job or a salary. When I raise my hands in worship and I look around and I see the believers in my community and I see tears streaming down their face, it is not because of the things that we have. It is not because of how worthy we are of our blessings. It is because of who God is in our life and what He has done for us. He is an unbelievable God. He has forgiven me. He has loved me. He has shown mercy in my life. The presence of the Holy Spirit when I've asked for something, and I don't necessarily mean a physical thing, when I've said, Lord, I need discernment. I need wisdom. I need to know how to handle the situation. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to handle this. And He's given me the direction. He's given me the words to say at the moment that I needed to say them. Or I've gone back to God and said, God, please forgive me. I responded so poorly to that situation. I responded so sharply in that text or that email. And I've had to go back and apologize to that person and say, God, I am your daughter and I represented you poorly today. And I have to go back and I have to apologize to God and say, God, forgive me. He does not shun His presence from me because I made a mistake and because I messed up. He meets me right back there. And when I'm in the car on the way to work in the morning and I'm in the parking lot before I get out of my car and I say, help me today, I've got some tough meetings, or help me today, I've got some meetings I need clarity on, or I've got some really big concerns on these things and I want to bring them up, but I don't want it to appear like I'm trying to push back just for the sake of pushing back. I need to bring up my concerns in a way that shows the facts, but that is not offensive or that is not pointed or that is not personal. I need to present this in a way that is kind, that is truthful, that is professional. When I think about who God is and where He meets me and the silly things that I find myself praying for sometimes, and He meets me right there, who am I to walk around and to judge other people and say, I'm sorry, you're not worthy of that same love. You're not worthy of that forgiveness. You're not worthy of generosity. Who am I to judge them? I am no better than they are. Our problems, our issues might be different. They might have a different face or a different name, but who am I to say, you don't deserve it. I'm the victim here. You're the one that was mean to me. Therefore, I'm never going to be kind to you. I'm so thankful for the love and compassion that Jesus has shown me and that I get to experience from having a relationship with him. I want to challenge you to look around, look on your calendar, be vigilant, keep your eyes open, and look for opportunities to go the second mile this week. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Faith at Work. If today's conversation encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or a coworker. And I would love to hear what you think. So you can text me at 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. And if you have questions that you would like answered on a future episode, leave me your name and the city and state that you are reaching out to me from. That number again is 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts. I look forward to being with you again next week. Until then, let's keep living out our faith at work.